The relentless fog of incompetence gradually dissipated, finally leaving the confines of the company where it felt as though time had come to a standstill. Fred, the founder's son and the acting vice president, had already taken his usual place, keenly observing the unfolding situation. In his eyes shone a confidence tinged with a barely perceptible superiority, as if he possessed knowledge that was hidden from others. His gaze was directed at me, and I felt a heavy wave of discontent slowly rising within me. Inga, one of the employees, watched the scene unfolding around us with a condescending smile, as though she, too, knew the outcome and found amusement in the spectacle. Her caustic remarks were aimed at me, as if to underscore the precarious and unstable nature of my position within the company. For, as soon as I were to leave this place, the director's favorites would lose their positions as well. Fred's sister, Samantha, who held the title of executive vice president, found nothing amusing about the proceedings. Her face was contorted with internal tension, and in desperation, she bit her lip as she observed the developments. "Do you really think that if Jack leaves, the company will come to a halt?" Samantha's voice was sharp and filled with indignation, directed at everyone present in the office. "Shut up. I am the acting CEO, and you are merely the executive vice president. If you can't listen to me, perhaps you should consider resigning," Fred retorted, his tone harsh and unyielding. Tensions were rising. Linda, the CEO's wife, fully supported Fred. In this game of ambition, she had clearly sided with him, and her icy gaze left no doubt. If I were to leave, Fred would seize control, and nothing could prevent that. I felt myself losing grip on the situation, my strength gradually waning as though I stood on the brink of an inevitable catastrophe. Samantha spoke again, her voice trembling with strain. "Watching this internal strife within the company is truly unbearable." She turned away, and I sensed she had already resigned herself to what was unfolding. "Maybe I should resign," she added softly, as if speaking not to us, but to herself. Her voice was laden with bitterness, as if she were bidding farewell to something profoundly important. I took a deep breath and slowly raised my head, realizing that there was no turning back. Silence enveloped the room. Everyone present had turned pale. I glanced around, searching for some semblance of understanding in their eyes. A strange calm washed over me, mingling with a growing sense of dread. "My name is Jack, and I am merely a 32-year-old salesman working in the mid-sized design firm Harrison Design." Yet, at that moment, I felt like a mere cog in a mechanism that was about to break down. Our enterprise is a family business. The head of the company, Mr. Harrison, serves as the CEO. His son Fred is the executive vice president, while his daughter Samantha holds the position of managing director. The CEO's wife, Linda, does not hold an official position, but her influence looms large. She regularly visits the office to express her dissatisfaction with various employees. Many say that working in family businesses often turns into a heavy burden. Linda, who leisurely strolls through the office, often seems to be a figure that brings no tangible benefit to the company. She spends her time in lengthy conversations, critical remarks, and discussions that rarely touch upon the essence of work. At times, her presence can be irritating, like a faint background noise. However, having learned to ignore her complaints, I began to see that this place possesses a unique atmosphere that, despite minor inconveniences, makes working here quite pleasant. The primary reason for such an environment is undoubtedly the CEO himself, Mr. Harrison. This man commands deep respect from all who have the honor of working with him. Despite his high position, he never flaunts his power or status. Harrison leads with gentle authority, always considering the opinions of each employee. It is this humility and attention to detail that create a unique atmosphere of mutual respect and support within the company. Here, no one feels oppressed or unnoticed, fostering not only productivity but also the emotional comfort of the staff. Mr. Harrison's children, Samantha and Fred, joined the company's management about 5 years ago. Samantha, the elder of the two, is a year older than her brother, Yet she occupies the role of managing director, while Fred, despite being younger, has been entrusted with the higher position of executive vice president. However, Samantha has never shown any discontent regarding this. Having graduated from a prestigious university in one of the major cities, she has always exemplified a high level of professionalism. She is a woman endowed with an astonishing ability to lead without seeking fame. She never boasts about her achievements or knowledge, and her humility draws people to her. Samantha consistently prioritizes the interests of the employees above all, making her a leader whom people are willing to follow with genuine respect and trust. Fred, on the other hand, evokes somewhat different sentiments. His path to leadership has been less conventional and fraught with challenges. Before joining the family business, he preferred to travel the world, leading a life of a tourist and explorer. There is nothing wrong with this. Travel enriches the soul and broadens horizons. However, upon returning to the family business, Fred seemed unable to fully adapt to the realities of the corporate world. His behavior occasionally betrays a sense of frivolity and inconsistency, as if he still lives in his college days. He struggles to accept criticism, especially when it concerns himself or his decisions. Our company may still adhere to traditional values, preserving echoes of an old society where power and authority were predominantly concentrated in the hands of men. Fred's promotion to executive vice president, despite his age and lesser experience compared to his elder sister Samantha, merely underscores this trend. Linda's influence, the CEO's wife, plays no small part in this. She not only cares for Fred but also supports him in every way, indulging his every whim, which secures his position within the company, even if he currently falls short of being a mature and seasoned leader. Yet, I have no doubt that over time, Fred will change. He is the son of the esteemed Mr. Harrison, and as he gains experience, he will likely become more mature and capable of managing the business. I feel that I, too, am still young, even though a whole decade has passed since I graduated from college. During this time, I have been devoted solely to one place of work, the Harrison Design Company. Yet, with each passing year, I feel the presence of younger professionals entering the company, reminding me of the time that has flown by unnoticed. And while I strive to hold my ground and not turn into that stern and unpleasant boss that one can become over the years, age sometimes makes its presence known. My connection with Mr. Harrison is also unique. We often play chess in his office, whether during lunch breaks or after work. For us, chess is not merely a game, it is a kind of intellectual ritual where we do not concede to one another, and our victories are almost evenly split between us. Today's game did not go in my favor, and Mr. Harrison noted with a gentle smile, "Maybe I'm getting old." "What are you talking about, Mr. Harrison? We still need you to keep moving forward," I replied with a smile, attempting to reassure him. He had recently turned 60, and this seemed to be sparking concerns about his age. For my part, I still see in him a model of energy and professionalism. Mr. Harrison embodies the ideal 60-year-old leader, still full of vigor and ideas. But his worries may stem not so much from age as from the fact that his son, Fred, has yet to reach the level at which he could confidently take over the management of the company. This is likely the source of his internal unease, which is reflected in his mood. "How about this, Jack?" "Of course, one more game, but this time I won't be lenient," Mr. Harrison proposed with genuine laughter, and we began to set the pieces back on the chessboard. At that moment, nothing foreshadowed disaster, but then something unexpected happened. An employee burst into the office, panic-stricken, her voice trembling as if she couldn't find the right words. "Was an ambulance called?" Her words echoed through the corridors. Mr. Harrison collapsed immediately after complaining of severe chest pain. We all rushed toward his office, and when we arrived, the door was already ajar. Several employees had gathered at the entrance, and I could hear the anxious voices of Fred and Alice. Here's the translation of your text into English, maintaining the style and grammar of the original. Dad, hold on. I'm loosening your tie, Dad, everything will be all right. Just don't move. Fred tried to calm his father, but panic was evident in his voice. The paramedics arrived quickly, and Mr. Harrison was carried out on a stretcher. Fred and Managing Director Alice accompanied him, who immediately took control of the situation. Linda, who was at home at the time, soon learned about the incident and rushed to the hospital. A heavy, tense atmosphere hung in the office. Work came to a standstill. Everyone sat in anticipation of news, occasionally glancing at each other and whispering about possible consequences. Samantha later called the company and reported that her father's condition was critical. He was unconscious and had a high fever. This news spread through the office like a wave of anxiety, enveloping each of us in troubling thoughts about the company's future. Everyone whispered about what would happen to Harrison Design if Mr. Harrison couldn't return to work. I believe things would settle down once Alice became CEO. Her confidence, professionalism, and natural charisma made me think she could guide the company through this crisis. However, it turned out differently. My worst fears came true when Fred, the eldest son, was appointed acting CEO. This decision felt like the inevitable shadow of a family business, where power is passed down through bloodlines rather than based on competence. But the reality was that employees couldn't intervene or vote for someone else. The next morning, Fred arrived at the office, donning his new role with an air of self-assurance that seemed inappropriate for the situation. During the morning meeting, Samantha, the managing director, announced the company's current state to everyone. Mr. Harrison is still unconscious. Harrison Design is experiencing its biggest crisis since its founding. Let's rally around our acting CEO and overcome this crisis together. I listened closely to her words, but at the same time, my thoughts wandered. Did she truly agree with this decision? It seemed that deeper feelings lay beneath her calm demeanor. Fred took the floor with a hint of narcissism in his voice. I understand that everyone is worried, but I need you to trust me and give your all. If we all work hard, of course, my father's condition will improve. As soon as he fell silent, one of his supporters began to applaud. Soon, the rest of the employees joined in, and I reluctantly followed, all the while observing Samantha. Her cold smile didn't hide her tension. She stood off to the side, as if trying to save face in front of everyone, though it was evident that her feelings were far from straightforward. When the applause died down, someone next to me whispered, "What's going to happen now?" I'm really worried. This quiet question only amplified my anxiety, which had been weighing on me for several days. Ever since Fred became acting CEO, serious changes began to unfold. His group of supporters, or as we now called them, his sect, became increasingly noticeable. And then layoffs began. 5 years had passed since Fred joined Harrison Design, and during that time, he had accumulated a fair number of detractors among the staff. I found myself among them. His decisions often clashed with our expectations, and now it seemed he had decided to rid himself of anyone who could impede him. There was no doubt that Fred intended to use his new position to consolidate power, and I was one of the targets he planned to eliminate. The situation escalated when Linda, Mr. Harrison's wife, began to frequent the office more often. She spent all her time in Fred's office, and although no one knew what they were discussing, her frequent visits were concerning. Rumors began to circulate among the staff that mass layoffs were imminent. "Hey, someone, bring some tea to the CEO's office and check what's going on in there," suggested one of the employees, and everyone froze, straining to catch any sound from behind the closed doors. Unfortunately, the voices were too quiet to discern anything. We waited for the girl to return with news, and as soon as she appeared, her face revealed everything without words. Layoffs were indeed underway. I felt a heavy weight settle on my shoulders as 2 of Fred's supporters entered the office, cutting off conversations and plunging us into silence. Their smug smiles and condescending glances spoke volumes. They felt untouchable, secure under the wing of the new acting CEO. One of them spoke mockingly, What's with the funeral atmosphere here? It's so quiet, as if the world has collapsed. We all need to support Harrison Design under Fred, our new leader. Though, who knows how many of you will still be here after all this? Just wait and see. Those words cut through the air, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Their loud laughter further highlighted the divide between them and those in less privileged positions. Sensing the inevitable, some employees began to exchange anxious glances. The very next day, Fred took active measures, eliminating one after another those who dared to express even the slightest dissent regarding his methods. The first to fall were the outspoken critics, followed by those who remained silent but still sided with Samantha during conflicts. Each day, the tension in the office grew, as if a shadow of unavoidable changes loomed over us all. Samantha, always strong and composed, seemed increasingly lonely and isolated. It was evident that she was being pushed out of the project, despite the fact that she, as Fred's sister, had once stood alongside him in the family business. What had gone wrong between them? Why couldn't they, just a year apart in age, find common ground and work together? Perhaps the reasons ran deeper, tied to their relationships with their parents, especially their mother, who, as Samantha said, always seemed to prefer Fred. Fred, as acting CEO, regularly visited the ailing Mr. Harrison in the hospital. He seems to have resigned himself to the fact that there's no longer any hope for his father's recovery, Alice said one day, shaking her head. This was a heavy blow for all of us, but especially for Samantha. She quietly acknowledged that Fred was eager to take control of the company, even though her father might still regain consciousness. However, her words carried a note of doubt. I'm not sure if that will happen in time. This fleeting moment made me ponder, what if there is still a chance for Mr. Harrison's return? A flicker of hope ignited in my heart. Samantha, the next time you go to the hospital, take me with you. I may not be able to do much, but I want to help in any way I can. We all hope for his recovery, I said with hope. Samantha nodded gratefully. All right, let's go right after work today, she replied. However, our decision was interrupted when one of Fred's supporters suddenly appeared and suspiciously directed me to the CEO's office. Samantha's face tightened. It seemed the moment I had dreaded had finally arrived. The time when I would have to leave the company I had worked for 10 years was at hand. I bowed my head to Samantha, realizing this might be our last conversation within these walls. It's not easy to leave you, but it looks like I need to meet with him now, I said. Samantha bit her lip, her eyes burning with determination. I'll go with you. I can't let this happen without me, she declared firmly. As we entered the CEO's office, Fred sat in a plush high-backed chair, embodying his newfound power. To his right stood one of his loyal supporters, while Linda, his mother, observed everything with a satisfied expression. The supporter took his place to Fred's left and said, Well, Jack, you're in the spotlight today too. You've devoted 10 years to this company, so let's call it an early retirement. Don't worry, you'll get a decent severance package. Fred spoke as if it were some kind of gift, but his words felt like a verdict. Joy flooded my soul as his supporters finally left the room, their contemptuous glares suffocating the atmosphere like a vice. They looked down on me, smirking with obvious delight, as if my presence here had become an unacceptable misunderstanding for them. Samantha, whom I had always known to be strong and resilient, now seemed trapped in her despair. Her lips were tightly pressed together, and she was holding back her emotions to conceal her inner turmoil. Here's the translation of your text into English, maintaining the style and grammar suitable for English readers. But at that moment, as if catching a wave of determination, she turned to Fred and shot him a challenging look. What do you think, if Jack leaves the company, will it really be able to function? Her words rang like a challenge. Shut up. Fred snapped back, looking at her with disdain. I'm the acting CEO, and you're just the managing director. If you can't follow my orders, maybe you should resign. Linda, standing slightly to the side, couldn't help but intervene. You're just a paper pusher, incapable of doing anything. You're talented, so why don't you try to get a job at another company? Her words dripped with biting irony, as if she was deliberately trying to poke Samantha. Mom, are you saying I'm not needed at this company? Samantha's voice trembled with anger and hurt. Linda just smirked, saying, "Oh, are you just now realizing that Fred will inherit the company? Don't worry, we'll adequately replace the employees we lost." Those words, spoken with self-satisfied ease, seemed to set the tone for victory, but their true meaning cut through the air like a sharp blade. I felt a surge of anger rising within me. Is this really the maternal support she offers her daughter, forcing her to accept defeat? Watching this unfold, I couldn't help but recall how, since joining this company, I had felt part of one big family, and now that family was falling apart, as if eaten away by poisonous stings of distrust and betrayal. When I leave, Fred will completely take over this place, Linda continued, her words sounding like a verdict. Of course, I can't stop that. It's painful to watch the family business decay from within, Samantha said, her voice barely audible but laced with bitterness. I feel sorry for Alice, but I'm tired too. Maybe it's better to just resign. Her words echoed a fatigue that was impossible to ignore. I sincerely appreciated everything Alice had done for me. When I lifted my head to say so, I saw Fred's and Linda's faces pale in shock. And that was when Mr. Harrison entered the room, slowly moving in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse clad in scrubs. His presence brought something powerful and weighty to the atmosphere, evoking both hope and fear. The doctor allowed me to come out for an hour, Mr. Harrison said, his voice imbued with a resolve that instantly shifted the somber mood in the room. Now that he was back, it remained to be seen what role he would play in this dramatic scene unfolding before us. Though he appeared somewhat frail, Mr. Harrison's eyes remained sharp and full of life, radiating a resilience that many could only envy. He moved slowly and confidently in the wheelchair, reminding everyone that even in the toughest times, the human spirit remains unyielding. Linda, swaying with agitation, approached him and, with a slight edge of irritation in her voice, said, "When will you finally recover enough to use a wheelchair? You and Fred never visited me, so you don't know that my condition is improving every day." His reply was filled with confidence and wisdom. "Oh, that's good. I've been worried all this time." Linda couldn't hide her dissatisfaction. She scoffed and turned away, directing her attention to Fred instead. "I see that in my absence, you did whatever you wanted," she said with quiet but palpable strength, and there was a hint of a threat in her voice. "Remember, you're just the acting CEO, not the COO, he added, as if putting Fred back in his place. Fred, initially looking bewildered, seemed unable to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, starting to tremble with tension. "I was just thinking about the company's interests," he said with a quivering voice, trying to justify himself, but this attempt only worsened his predicament. "I thought you were done for," he whispered, radiating a fear that was impossible to conceal beneath his outward calm. "You underestimated me." Mr. Harrison's words sounded like thunder in a clear sky. "My pulse has quickened, I've been prescribed a treatment, and my fever has dropped." He spoke with such assured firmness that Fred could only blink in fear. "That's great," Linda said, trying to maintain a friendly atmosphere, but her efforts seemed forced against the overall tension. Mr. Harrison fixed a penetrating gaze on Fred, his look sharp and full of skepticism. "Don't say things you don't mean," he said, clearly aware of his son's manipulations. "But fine, it's probably your mother's influence," he added with a slight smirk. Linda couldn't contain her irritation and, saying these words, stood up for her son, would never put such thoughts in Fred's head. She looked at Mr. Harrison with determination, as if trying to assure him of her sincerity, but he just shook his head, knowing that true intentions don't always align with what's spoken. "Alice, I'm feeling a bit tired," Linda finally said, her voice softening and filled with genuine concern. "Could you call a taxi to take me back to the hospital?" Her request was simple, but it carried the weight of all the emotions and storms that had been brewing in that small space. Each person present could feel the tension rising and the acute awareness of what would happen next, how their lives would change in light of these events, what would become of their family business and relationships as everything they once considered unshakable crumbled beneath their feet. Mr. Harrison seemed determined to regain his authority despite the constraints of the hospital room. He spoke with undeniable confidence. "I'll have you taking orders straight from your hospital room. I'll be your hands and feet." This declaration sparked excitement in the room, and Samantha, feeling the incredible upheaval, sensed her own fears and doubts gradually dissipating. She realized with relief that her premature retirement had been cancelled, as if with it, her hopes had returned. Mr. Harrison's recovery became a genuine triumph within their small family drama. Each day, he worked diligently on his rehabilitation, gradually regaining the muscles weakened by illness. His hard work knew no bounds, and soon he began walking confidently again, step by step overcoming obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable. It was an inspiring sight to witness his efforts, and I, visiting the hospital room daily with Samantha, felt that each encounter empowered us all. Every time we saw Mr. Harrison, he appeared increasingly vigorous, yet we understood that full recovery would likely take even more time. Soon, Samantha made a decision that could profoundly impact the fate of their business. She brought a computer into the hospital room. This was done to facilitate Mr. Harrison's ability to fulfill his CEO duties, even in such limited circumstances. He was well versed in modern technology and welcomed the opportunity to work from his laptop, as if nothing could prevent him from returning to business. As soon as he opened his laptop and turned it on, the room filled with anticipation. "What should we decide on first?" he asked in an authoritative tone, awakening in all of us a sense of the moment's significance. His first thought was about reviving the Harrison project, about restoring it to its original state. The computer screen reflected a list of dismissed employees, and I noticed a shadow of concern cross Samantha's and Mr. Harrison's faces. This could seem too good to be true, just dismissing them at will and then inviting them back. But the reality was different. We couldn't act without them. "I'm ready to apologize to each of them personally," Mr. Harrison said, his voice filled with sincerity and resolve. This promise became a glimmer of hope for all of us. We understood that to restore the company's former glory, it would require not just the return of the dismissed but also the rebuilding of trust that had been undermined. In his words was a genuine concern for the people who were part of this story, and that was reassuring. We were ready to support him in this endeavor, to help him reclaim not only the company but also the team's spirit that had been shattered. "Let me know if you need any adjustments or further assistance." "That's right, I will join you and not apologize for any of it," she said with firmness, as if with this phrase she wasn't just entering the fight, but reclaiming all lost ground. This would have been inevitable if not for Mr. Harrison's illness, which unexpectedly interfered with the company's affairs. Her gaze was filled with determination, inspiring everyone around her. Mr. Harrison, long plagued by weakness and anxiety, nodded with hope, and his approval gave us all confidence. Following his instructions, we began to reinstate the employees who had been let go, and this initiative proved to be successful. Each of us was delighted to see familiar faces again, tired but smiling. "I'm so glad to have my job back," one employee admitted, his voice trembling with happiness. "I was worried about my remaining mortgage payments," he added with relief. The air was filled with an atmosphere of joy and unity. "Let's continue supporting Mr. Harrison," said one of the female employees, her eyes glowing with hope. 90% of the original staff has already been reinstated," added another. Unfortunately, this didn't mean we could return everything to how it once was. New challenges awaited us, job postings had to be made, and fresh talent needed to be attracted. As someone remarked, new oil would certainly help the company grow even further. However, we were all aware that these changes were happening amid heavy shifts. Despite his ailments, Mr. Harrison had returned to work in a wheelchair, reminding everyone of how hard he had fought his illness. It's no joke. If you let your guard down, your son might just take over the company, he remarked with a slight smile, to which Fred, full of sarcasm, replied, "That's right, Dad, we still need to stay strong." Yet, behind the scenes, tensions within the Harrison family were brewing, unknown to us. A drama had unfolded, dividing the family into two factions: Mr. Harrison, Alice, Linda, and Fred. This split cast a heavy shadow over the workplace atmosphere. Linda, it seemed, had fallen not just for her husband, but for the fight itself. However, as is well known, love between a man and a woman doesn't last forever, and as someone with no personal experience of this, I felt like an outsider in this emotional whirlwind. Still, with the return of most employees, it was time for reckoning. We all knew that the changes would not spare any of us. Everyone had to reassess their role in the company, their ambitions, and possibly their relationships. The time for reckoning over mistakes and misunderstandings had arrived, looming over us like an approaching storm, making us reflect on the future and the consequences it might bring. For those who had first betrayed Mr. Harrison, the sword of justice loomed. Fred's supporters, once confident in their impunity, were laid off like leaves falling from a tree in the autumn wind. The two who had been close to Fred made him reconsider his actions and understanding of power, but the true culprit, as Mr. Harrison noted, was hiding in the shadows, Linda. As time passed, resentment built up in Mr. Harrison and Linda's marriage, grievances they didn't dare speak of aloud. Her attitude toward Fred had become excessively soft, bordering on indulgence, causing Mr. Harrison to worry that their rash actions might undermine the foundation of the family business. Linda, eager to express her love for her son, appointed Fred as executive vice president, elevating him above Hales, despite her seniority. But alas, this act of favor did not resonate with Fred's heart, and soon he found himself surrounded by an increasingly gloomy atmosphere. Meanwhile, other employees who had supported Fred received only stern warnings. They were vulnerable, forced to adapt to those who held power. Mr. Harrison, with his keen insight, understood this and refrained from harsh measures such as demotions or firings. However, the real culprits of this conflict were undeniably Fred and Linda, his own son and wife. In his heart, torn by contradictions, there was a growing need to restore justice. Thus, Fred was demoted to a regular employee for manipulating the fate of his colleagues in his father's absence. This decision seemed personal, and I was fortunate enough to be promoted to executive vice president after joining the company. I even used the CEO's office while Mr. Harrison watched the situation unfold with concern and shame. Fred, now in a humiliating position, appeared less and less in the office where I and others held leadership positions. His absence felt like a shadow, wandering through the corridors like an invisible ghost, leaving behind a cold trail of dissatisfaction and judgment. The tension was palpable, like a taut string ready to snap, and each of us understood that the changes already brewing within the company might bring about consequences no one dared to imagine. In truth, Fred's absence created a kind of relief, where it was unclear how to handle his whims and constant evasions. His frequent absences caused growing concern, and I couldn't resist asking Samantha about his domestic situation. Alice, as she informed me, lived alone, while Fred continued to stay under the same roof as his parents, ultimately turning him into a recluse, locked in his own room where the housekeeper would merely leave him food in the hallway. It was simply unbelievable. Alice speculated that Fred might have already lost his confidence, and this thought left me slightly uneasy. Linda, however, continued to direct all her anger and reproaches at Fred, blaming him for his failures. The situation in their family resembled the chaos caused by Mr. Harrison's illness. Their marital relationship seemed hopelessly damaged. Both parents, despite their deep feelings for their children, lived together only for their sake, and this life resembled an endless struggle where each day demanded new efforts and sacrifices. In response to all these difficulties, Mr. Harrison, determined to restore justice, decided to punish Linda by banning her from entering the company. This decision dealt a serious blow to the family, which was already falling apart at the seams. Linda, in turn, complained that Mr. Harrison had shown her photos and documents gathered by a private investigator. "Do you think I don't know about this?" he retorted bitterly, leaving no doubt that the many years of their marriage had lost their value in light of her betrayal. The reason Linda had so often visited Mr. Harrison was that her lover was close by. This young employee, around 30, received generous sums of money from her, and since Mick had taken over as acting CEO, rumors began circulating among colleagues about this man's possible promotion, which looked like a special favor to Linda. Engulfed in her feelings for him, she once again betrayed her husband, and with each new revelation, old wounds inevitably resurfaced. "After all these years of loving you, you destroyed it all with this one incident. The money you spent on him was earned through my hard work," Mr. Harrison said, his voice heavy with deep pain and betrayal that no amount of generosity could soothe. This moment, like a lightning strike, shattered their lives, leaving behind only dark clouds of distrust and bitterness. Mr. Harrison bitterly noted how Linda, in her attempts to justify her actions, only sank deeper into a web of lies and self-deception. Her desperate excuses found no resonance in his heart, as behind them lay the dark shadow of betrayal, tinged with the scent of her desires and ambitions. For him, her attempt to privatize the company became a serious offense, unforgivable. Thus, their separation became inevitable. Their divorce was the result of countless irreparable mistakes made over the years of their life together. Once Linda was set free, her lover, suddenly aware of the gravity of the situation, hastened to resign, returned to his hometown, leaving behind only emptiness and disappointment. Fred, who had adored his mother since childhood, blindly opposed the divorce, believing it was unfair to Linda. How will she live now? They're getting divorced, and she's just supposed to work or do something else. To work properly, to leave, he said with a hint of reproach in his voice, not fully grasping the weight of the situation. Mr. Harrison, holding back a wave of disappointment, replied with the indifference that had long become second nature to him, "After all, if you're not willing to work, then you should leave the house." This decision was a harsh blow for Fred, who for so long had felt like a king in his own palace. In the end, both Fred and Linda were asked to leave their home, as if they had become unwelcome guests who had spoiled the atmosphere. Fred, usually such a young and capable man, seemed to lose his true nature in this situation, preferring to bask in past accomplishments, playing the role of a spoiled child who had never known real work. His dismissal was not only a blow to his ego, but also a harsh confrontation with reality. Their financial situation rapidly worsened, and mother and son found themselves on the verge of despair, unsure of where to turn next. Eventually, they were forced to return to Linda's family home, which had passed into the hands of her brother and his wife. The neighbors, aware of their hardships, couldn't refuse their request for help and offered them a small room. Now mother and son lived in cramped conditions, burdened by uncertainty and disappointment. Meanwhile, among those who remained at Harrison Design, Mr. Harrison had fully recovered and no longer needed a wheelchair, gradually regaining his influence and confidence, while his former family was slowly falling apart. Mr. Harrison, leaning on a cane, walked confidently through the office, back to his duties. Each step radiated strength, signaling his full recovery, and the cane served only as a symbol of caution, a reminder of the trials he had endured. With the return of the CEO, life at Harrison Design resumed its usual rhythm, as if the sun had reappeared after a long storm. I was promoted to head of the sales department, and I felt the weight of a new, more significant responsibility on my shoulders. In this promotion, I saw not only recognition of my efforts but also Mr. Harrison's trust, as he generously shared his wisdom with us. My subordinates supported me in this new role, and each day I found more satisfaction in my work, feeling my influence grow. Meanwhile, Samantha, who had become the executive vice president, excelled in her role as Mr. Harrison's trusted advisor. She deftly handled complex situations, instilling the team with confidence and optimism. Deep down, I realized that her appointment to this position should have happened much earlier. If it weren't for that incident with the golf club, perhaps many things would have turned out differently. I understand that you wanted to give Fred a chance, Mr. Harrison said, his voice steady and calm. But it's good we realized early on that he wasn't cut out for it. Ellis nodded in agreement, her face filled with understanding and regret. As they often said, the more problems you have with a child, the more challenging they become, and Fred had become a prime example of this. Mr. Harrison deeply regretted appointing his son as executive vice president solely out of parental attachment. In the end, the company managed to weather the crisis that almost tore it apart. The company's productivity increased noticeably, and employee salaries rose, a tangible sign of our collective efforts. We, the employees, were now more motivated than ever, united under Mr. Harrison's wise leadership, ready to build the company's future together. That day, during lunch, we felt that our unity and determination could overcome any obstacles, and each of us was prepared to contribute to the common cause. In Mr. Harrison's office, the usual atmosphere of calm professionalism reigned when I once again found myself beside him at the chessboard. This ritual, which we had resumed after his long hospital stay, had become a kind of escape for both of us. We formed a unique partnership, our skills complementing each other, leading to thrilling victories and equally dramatic defeats. I noticed how much Mr. Harrison enjoyed the game. It was not only a distraction but also a metaphor for business, where every piece, every move, had its significance. You know, business is a lot like golf, he remarked. It's no fun if you take it too seriously. I nodded in agreement, understanding that despite the high stakes, he knew how to find joy even in the most challenging situations. But suddenly, his voice grew more serious, and he said something unexpected. Jack Aaron, are you planning to get married? You're at a good age for it. His question caught me off guard, and I felt a bit embarrassed, focusing back on the chessboard. Honestly, I don't have time for it, I replied, slightly flustered. I'm so absorbed in work that I don't even know where to look for a girl. But you're right, maybe it's time to start thinking about settling down. He was silent for a moment, lost in thought, then added with a touch of irony, I may not be the best person to give marriage advice, considering how things turned out in my own life, but maybe you should start thinking about it. Maybe I should start going to social events, I joked, trying to ease my awkwardness. At that moment, Ellis entered the room, interrupting our conversation. She gently closed the door, and seeing us at the chessboard, smiled. Oh, you're playing chess again. You two get along so well, she said with genuine admiration. The only one who plays with me is Jack. Mr. Harrison, watching our game with interest, sat down nearby, ready to assess our battle of wits. Jack will teach me chess too. I want to learn and someday beat Dad. Ellis exclaimed enthusiastically, her eyes filled with a sincere dream. Playing against me all the time is a great idea, she added, winking. Mr. Harrison must get bored with just the two of you hanging out here. We all laughed, and once again, the atmosphere was warm and friendly, as if even chess, such a serious game, could bring us together and bring joy. I noticed Mr. Harrison shift his gaze from me to Ellis, his face lighting up with a playful smile, and he suggested, how about the three of us go out for sushi tonight? The idea instantly filled me with excitement, and I quickly responded, that sounds great, Mr. Harrison. Ellis, are you free? She replied enthusiastically, I wouldn't mind at all. It sounds like it would be a great time for us. Ellis, with a touch of thoughtfulness, added, it seems like we've been spending more time together lately. It's created a comfortable and pleasant bond. Mr. Harrison nodded with satisfaction and, with a smile on his face, said, I just want to tell Jack it's time for him to seriously think about marriage. Ellis, the same goes for you. Don't stay single forever. I'd like to see some grandchildren. This statement left both of us a little flustered. Ellis, slightly blushing, responded with undisguised surprise, well, I feel a bit rushed thinking about children. Besides, I don't have anyone in mind right now. Maybe I should go to a mixer. I couldn't help but laugh when Ellis mentioned she'd actually heard that advice from someone else before. Maybe next time, we'll all go to a mixer together. It would be nice to make sure there are a few eligible guys there, she noted, her smile full of sincerity. Maybe, I added with a slight hesitation, if it's the two of you, that might speed things up. Mr. Harrison and I exchanged a glance and laughed, knowing we were discussing something much more than just a joke. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought of seeing Ellis in a different light, but inside, I still lacked the confidence to ask her out. At that moment, my gaze fell on Samantha, sitting nearby. Her cheeks had turned slightly pink, which seemed to hint at her feeling a bit awkward about our conversation too. I vaguely considered asking her out for a drink, just the two of us, away from all this fun, to talk in private and get to know her better, but there was an air of uncertainty, as if I didn't quite know how to begin.